My name is Bill Bhaneja. I am one of the 4 directors of Canadian Department of Peace Initiative. My background is I'm a political scientist. I worked with the Canadian Foreign Service for 30 years, and then I was a senior fellow at the University of Ottawa, and this paper is a result of that. So I'm calling it Why a Non-Killing Political Science. As all you know, in political science, we talk about power, we talk about violence as a very important tool, in forms of war that politicians have to eventually, sometimes they have to use it. So this is a sort of a critique of the power-based political science seen through the work of an American political scientist, Professor Glenn D. Page of University of Hawaii. Page's thesis implores us to consider whether non-killing behavior is a reasonable possibility and how this should be regarded in the discipline so that it may contribute to the realization of non-killing human societies. So non-killing is a term coined by Page. As presented, it refers mainly to a form of society where killing, threats to kill, and conditions conducive to killing are absent. This, however, does not mean that such a society is unbounded or undifferentiated or conflict-free, but only that its structure and processes do not depend upon aggression and killing. This model entails a deep transformation of those societal premises rooted in widespread acceptance of violence in all of its forms, but consequently also the refutation of mainstream violence-accepting sciences from politics to biology. Non-killing envisages a paradigm shift with new principles, new language, new values, and new methodological criteria. It will be fallacious to assume non-killing to be a utopian paradigm. Studies reveal that violence is preventable. There is no basis to the myth that man as a killer is animal by nature. Grounded in the Seville Statement of Violence on Violence, which came out in 1986, it brought together the work of several scientists refuting a common belief that humans have an instinctive tendency to war, a violent brain, or that lethal behavior is genetically programmed into human nature. The conclusions of the document showed that such assumptions were scientifically incorrect. So, Page's work demonstrates that less than 2 or even 1% of all Homo sapiens have been killers of fellow humans. The percentage of killers in specific societies, of course, may vary according to culture and era. And in fact, violence is not inherent, but a reactive. It's a causal. In fact, among top 10 reasons for deaths confirmed by World Health Organization study on violence and health, it shows that killing by wars rank lower than homicides and suicides. So among the top 10 lists of reasons for killings, in fact, war is the 10th. So the idea of human nature being violent becomes less tangible with the new anthropological discovery, RD. It's a discovery of 4.3 million year old human remains in Ethiopia. And scientists have found that RD is not a common ancestor between chimps and humans, but as she dates to not long after the two lines diverged, her fragile bones and small canine teeth suggest that humans never look like chimps. RD's discovery challenges the previous assumption that our last common ancestor was a killer. Conclusion drawn is that apes and monkeys with big canines used them as weapons, but RD and her contemporaries probably had a social structure without strong male and male conflict. Anthony Adolph, known for his book Peace, A World History, in a well-documented work concludes that humans are alive today because of what humans from our beginning did not do. And that is in extinguishing each other. And that's why we are all alive. This is a remarkable way to turn the violent history of humanity upside down. It may be that things not conventionally noted in the violent historical record are why we are alive today. The survival and multiplication of mankind testifies to the dominance of vitality over lethality in human nature. An important question Adolph's work raises is the need for research on what we humans were doing or not doing that has brought us to non-killing present and future potential. The predominance of non-killing behavior in humans and societies points to chosen neglect by the discipline of a large chunk of reality surrounding us, the understanding of the causes and effects that have, instead of our disappearance as a human race, has kept us alive. And notions such as power, authority, aggression, and violence in political relations and decision-making processes have been at the center of political science as a discipline. Sociologist Max Weber, seminal essay, Politics as a Vocation, delivered as a lecture in Munich in 1918, describes the politics to be the art of compromise in which the power plays a decisive role. Weber assigns a special place for violence in his description of power. Ultimately, the decisive means of violence, politics is violence. Weber is not the first one to articulate such thinking. He comes in a long tradition of political thinkers who have been seeing synonymy between power and authority and violence as a necessary evil to create a peaceful society. So in this context, the need of military to protect citizenry has been a legitimate expression of use of violence by state. Now, considerable developments have taken place in politics and the use of instruments of violence by states since 1918, since that Weber could not have imagined. Demonstration of power through military wars is becoming an outdated concept, as we come to realize that there are no longer winnable wars. Former Deputy NATO Supreme Commander General Rupert Smith, in his 2007 book, The Utility of Force, The Art of War in a Modern World, writes about the limitations of technology-based interstate industrial wars as a decisive tool for a clear-cut victory over their opponent. Since the Second World War, there has been hardly a victorious war. That's what he says. A general says that there has been hardly a victorious war won by a powerful country, exception being Falkland and Grenada, if they could be called wars. So in most other cases, the results have been ceasefires, the areas in disputes remaining contested, along with the prolonged encampment for expeditionary military forces in foreign soils over a generation or sometime longer. So a non-killing peace is different from two existing definitions of peace. One, simply the absence of war, and two, more comprehensive vision of positive peace, which includes absence of conditions that lead to violence and war. Page's non-killing formulation is closer to the second formulation, as it implies a concrete path for its realization, eliminate killing and the threat of killing as a step towards elimination of all forms of violence. The concept in that sense goes beyond Gene Sharp's political strategy of non-violent civil disobedience or Johann Galting's root causes of structural and cultural violence. According to Page, it is the possibility of directly killing humans that supports all forms of non-lethal and pre-lethal violence, which ultimately makes other forms of killing an option, and that has to be prevented. Page raises a profound question for the student of politics. What would happen if the premise of non-killing potentiality replaced the assumption of lethal inescapability as the basis of politics? Non-killing potentiality is not abandonment of military engagement, but a conscious choice of a lens from which one can think of developing measurable alternative options for policy and program development for peace and stability. He describes the non-killing concept as follows. Wherever killing occurs, from homicide to genocide to atomic annihilation, we need to understand processes of cause and effect, however complex and interdependent. Page points out that the need to understand killing is more acute for a non-killing political science, as any killing demands causal explanation. We need to know who kills whom, how, where, when, and why, and with what antecedents, contextual conditions, individual and social meanings and consequences. And of course, we need to discover cross-case patterns of lethal causality for intensive, parsimonious, typological explanation. He asserts that this will not be enough. The same analysis is needed for why humans do not kill, why killers shift to non-killing, and for how progress can be made toward completely non-killing societies. All social, natural, and life sciences can contribute. So the tension between fact and values within political science is not something new. It has remained an unresolved topic since the 1960s. The problem results from the values on which the discipline has chosen to concentrate. Instead of recognizing the right to life and living as the first order value of the discipline, it has chosen democracy, governance, polity as the values of primary importance. If we choose to ignore the life and right to living as the first order values, then the other liberal values appear insignificant. Not treating right to living as a first order value, we see, for instance, how governments conveniently transform just causes into just wars. Howard Since, these are his words. In the examination of analysis of contemporary and political science and techniques, normative social science tends to be written in small letters. So despite a substantial body of peaceful conflict transformation literature, the normative perspective in political theory has not been taken seriously and only rarely utilized by the discipline's gatekeepers, even when presented with the behaviorist paradigm as Page provides in his work. So in conclusion, let me point out the non-killing tendencies Page describes at public policy level are worth noting. For example, in the existence of 27 countries that are without armies, there are 95 countries where capital punishment does not exist. There are 47 countries where the principle of consensus objection to military conscription is respected and accepted. So and in 21st century, on top of that, we have now ministries and departments of peace already in select countries, in select governments with a strategic focus for a non-killing peace building. Last September, Costa Rica, again, it has been always a pioneer, and it announced a Ministry of Peace and Justice. A year before that in Nepal, we had a Ministry of Peace and Reconstruction, which has established a budget of $150 million. In Catalan region of Spain, there's now a peace department. Another variation on the same theme exists in Philippines, in the office of the presidential advisor on peace process, which has been in existence for some time. Similar developments are underway in Africa, in places like southern Sudan and Rwanda. So Page's plea for non-killing political science as a gentle provocation is not only to remind political science about its normative mandate, but to go a step further, that non-killing be added to the classical canon of norms, so that the demand for new thinking in the discipline is introduced with one central argument. That is, if it is true that political science is really the science of the art of community, and not least that of intercultural living together, then the Archimedes point and the sixth commandment, you shall not kill, be the global ethos of politics and its scientific critique. Non-killing as the first order value of political science research and teaching shows immense scope for research, waiting to be done, not as a neglect on the part of social science practitioners, but an opportunity for exploration for all of us who are involved in teaching and researching. Thank you.